Your photo has been stolen, and now it's up to you to prove your copyright. My name is Nico Trinkhaus, and I'm a professional photographer. I have helped hundreds of photographers who came to me when their photos had been stolen. And for infringements on my own works, I have been protecting my copyright in court in more than 30 countries around the world. I initially recorded this video for my clients at PhotoClaim, but decided to make it public now as I want every photographer to be confident about their rights. However, please note, this is not legal advice and I'm not a lawyer, okay? I am a photographer who had to deal with copyright a lot, and I'm happy to share what I've learned. So let's jump right in. First, you need to prove that you are the author of the image. And then second, you need to prove that there was a creative input. I will explain you how you can prove both without fail in court. First, to establish that you are the author of the image, we start with your RAW files. That's the images that are captured by the camera and that later on you edit in Lightroom or Photoshop or wherever you do your post-processing. If you're a professional photographer, most likely you will not just shoot in JPEG mode, but you are going to shoot in the RAW files. Here, for the RAW files, it's important that you have them available at any time. So make sure you have a backup system in place. Without the RAW files, it will be very, very tricky to prove your copyright. This is basically, if you think of analog photography, you have your negatives. And since only you have the negatives, they will always go a long way to prove your copyright. Now, never hand over those RAW files if you can avoid it by any chance. That means don't give it to a client and don't even give it to the court. Because if you give something to the court, it becomes part of the record. And in most countries, that is actually a public record. So a lawyer could go then to the court and say, hey, I want to have a look into that particular case. And I want to have a look in the case files. And then that person gets access and could theoretically make a copy of this. Now, therefore, in future, you cannot anymore tell the court like, well, look, I have the copyright because I have the RAW files. Here they are, that's it. I'm the only one who has access to it. Nobody else can claim ownership because nobody else has touched the RAW files. If someone else has access to it, you can't say this with confidence anymore. So how I like to prove copyright instead in court is I use a software service called PicDrop, and here I can upload my RAW files, so they will be on my account, they are in the cloud, but anyone else has just view-only access, so they can see it's a RAW file, they see the EXIF information, they can see the file format, but they cannot download it. Like you can specifically disallow downloading in that system, and that works for me very well because then I can create a link to a folder in which I have the final image, the final artwork, as well as the RAW files, so that the court can easily establish, okay, those are the original images, the negatives, so to say. That is the final artwork that has been stolen by the infringer, and they get the whole link. And based on that, they typically grant me my copyright. Another option is, of course, you could have a witness. Maybe you wasn't alone when you took the photograph. Maybe your spouse has been traveling with you, or you've met another photographer and you took photos together on that evening. Anything like that can go a long way. So in that case, just tell the court, well, I have a witness available. That person can testify that he or she saw me taking photos on that particular evening. That can give yet more credibility. So now that we covered the RAW files, that's just one thing. Now, theoretically, you could have gotten access to the RAW files by someone else, right? So how do you prove that you actually took the photos? The next thing I like to do is highlighting the camera body, because in the EXIF information of the RAW file, you will find the serial number of the body with which this photo was taken. So if you still have access to your camera bodies, then you can make a photo of the camera body, and on there you will see the serial number, and then you can see that the serial number matches the serial number in the EXIF information. What I do is I make a photo of the camera body next to my card so that this is like directly connected, and then I send that photo to the court so that they can see, okay, my ID card was lying next to the camera that has the serial number that matches the serial number in the EXIF information of the raw file that was used to create the final image. Once you have those links established, it is very, very difficult for anyone to argue that you are not the copyright owner. All in all, never forget, the judge is a human. So what you need to do is you need to convince him that, yeah, this is your photo. So the more you can show, the better it gets. So if you can prove, yeah, here's my raw file, I have it backed up, I have it ready whenever I need it, I can send you the access to this. I'm not sending you the original, and this is why. And then you show that you had access to the body of the camera with which this photo was taken, and maybe you even have a witness, then what can the judge say but just, yeah, you have the copyright on this, you are the author. Now, I mentioned before that there's a second thing that we need to prove, and that is your creative input. In Europe, it works a bit differently than in the US. So in the US, you have the Copyright Office, you make your quarterly applications, and you will be granted your copyright this way. In Europe, the copyright is automatically existing with the moment of creation. However, there is one limitation to this, and for this, we need to have a look in the European Directive. So in Article 6, it says, photographs which are original in the sense that they are the author's own intellectual creation shall be protected. And then further, no other criteria shall be applied to determine their eligibility for protection. So the own intellectual creation is the only thing that truly matters to establish your copyright, once it's clear that you are the author. How do you do that? So there usually are two moments of creative input, at least, right? One is in the field, when you go around and you've tried to find the right composition that works with how you want to display the subject. You go for the right time of the day. You have so many things that are being done in the field, and that non-photographers may have a difficult time to understand. So as much as I want to say, yeah, of course, that's your creative input. Like composition, in my opinion, is the most important aspect of photography. It is very difficult to bring this to someone who has no understanding of photography. What I found working well for me instead is I go into the post-processing. So I take the image just as it comes out in the raw file, and I'm doing quite a bit of editing on my images until I release them. So what I have then is I have the layer file from Photoshop, or I have all the edits broken down in Lightroom. And then I can create a video that just toggles all the layers on and off. And that way I can later on provide like a step-by-step process of how I got from the raw file to the final image. And if you have a judge that kind of like goes and, well, this is just a technical creation, it's not something that should be protected because you just pointed your camera there and you shot it and that's it. This judge can easily be convinced by seeing all the steps that you've taken, like playing with the shadows and the highlights to get a harmonic image, tweaking the colors, all the things that you're doing in post-processing. And since you can show the step-by-step process, it becomes so much more intuitive to understand by non-photographers that I found this to work really, really well in court. Another option is you can apply with these images. If you have some images that are stolen more often than others, go ahead and apply these images for awards. There are different types of awards. There's the one category, which I would say is the competition kind of award, where the winner takes it all. So you have like one winner of the competition. And there's a second type of award where it's judging the image itself, kind of unrelated to the other images that are participating in the competition. So, and what I mean is like this second type of competition is what we will want to focus on here, because you will get a scale from 0 to 100. And if your image scores more than 80 points, you will get a golden award for it. So having a certificate by a board of judges saying, yeah, we certify that like there's significant creative input into this work, we give this 80 out of 100 points, meaning we give it a golden medal in whatever our competition is here. That is yet another thing that you can hand over to the judge in the ordinary court and say, look, here are professionals, they do that regularly, judging images based on how creative they are, based on how well executed they are. And they gave this photograph a gold award. If you provide such a certificate to the court, it again gives you yet another level of trust that the judge may want to use in your favor. Now, why do we need to prove this creative input? Is this really necessary? And in Europe, yeah, it is in many member states. So I'm from Germany, and in Germany it's easy. We don't basically need it because the hurdle of creative input is very low, and almost every photo that you could imagine is protected by the copyright. In France, for example, they have a much higher standard as to what they consider as a creative photograph. So there have been several cases in which some just paparazzi photo or sports photography has been denied the protection of copyright because they say this is just documentary and there was no creative input from the author. So in France, it would be way more important to actually show a step-by-step process and provide your thinking and provide your artistic input that went into the image. And this really goes then member state to member state, and therefore the directive is nice but kind of not enough because you still have a lot of uncertainty when it comes to the member states. Therefore, I propose that you always keep track of your workflow, that in case you need it, you have it available. So I save my Photoshop files as a TIFF data with all the layers. And yeah, it takes a bit of space on the hard drive, but again, it can become very, very valuable later on. And similarly, I always keep my Lightroom catalog backed up so that if necessary, I can show the step-by-step process of the edits that I've made in there. So if you follow all these steps, the judge definitely should grant you your copyright protection. And so now I'm curious, has this ever happened to you? Did you have your photos being stolen and did you go to court? And if so, what is your experience? Was it easy to prove your copyright, or did you maybe have something else to show off that I didn't cover in this video? Please let us know in the comments below, because we can all learn from each other. And I think it's very important for us photographers to help each other so that we can fight image theft in an efficient way and we protect our rights. Thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe to this channel to get to know more about my works as well as about my tips for copyright protection. Thank you very much.